Well, thanks so much. Great to be back in South Florida. Great to be with you here today. We've got two great pieces of legislation that we'll be talking about. I'm joined here by our Agriculture Commissioner, Wilton Simpson, our Surgeon General, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, Senator Ileana Garcia. Is this your district where we're at now? Yep. And Miami-Dade County Commissioner Roberto Gonzalez. So I want to thank them, and they're all going to talk about some of the things that we're doing today. Now, before I get into that, one, I just wanted to publicly say, we lost Rabbi Lipsker recently, and he was a good friend of ours for a long time. I know he meant a lot to people, not just in the Jewish community, but beyond in South Florida, and was a really great Floridian and a great American. So our condolences go out to them, yeah, for sure. And so that was sad news. On some good news, Florida once again rated #1 economy in the country by U.S. News and World Report. And that's 2 years in a row. We've also been #1 economy 2 years in a row by CNBC. We continue to be #1 for higher education. I think that's 8 or 9 years in a row. And when I became governor, we were ranked 13th overall for whatever metrics they use. And now we're up to 6 overall. And there's a variety of factors that go into that. And so we're excited about that. And, we've got a lot of great opportunities ahead of us. If you look at where we are just in terms of, say, the budget and the fiscal in Florida, since I've been governor, we've almost quadrupled the state's rainy day fund. If you look at the amount of surplus that we've carried, used to be pretty consistent. There'd be $5-6 billion in reserve. And then we've gotten that up to where we're like 20, 25 even. That we got it down from there because that was too much, and we've done some infrastructure, tax cuts, whatever. But we have really, really healthy reserves and running big surpluses. But then, at the same time, paying down an accelerated rate of our state's debt. So of 180 years, if you looked at all the debt that we've accumulated as a state, just since I've been governor, we've retired 41% of that. And when you do that early, and you got to be strategic, you don't always do it early because it depends, but if you can do it early, we've now saved each year hundreds of millions of dollars in interest costs that you would have had to bear as taxpayers. And so that's a great story we're going to continue. We now have the lowest per capita debt of any state in the United States, and we have the lowest number of state government workers per capita. So you talk about lean government, lean bureaucracy, we have that for sure. But with all of that, paying down debt, surplus, lean government, we've done really big things. I mean, we've done big things for environment and natural resources. You look at what we've done with Biscayne Bay, the Everglades. You look at what we've done for transportation. We obviously have the junction here in South Florida that's going to end up being very helpful. This is tougher here to help with the traffic because there's not as many options to do. But we've accelerated billions of dollars. We have projects. We just unveiled in I-4. We got all this stuff around I-4. That honestly sometimes is even worse than South Florida traffic, believe it or not. Horrible traffic sometimes, and it can be at any time of the day. And so there's been a bunch of I-4 stuff done. We've opened stuff. It's been good, but there's more that needs to be done. There's also connecting roads and bypass roads, so we're doing all. But we said, well, while we're accelerating that, let's do some temporary expansion of lanes. And so we did that 8 months ahead of schedule. And I just put out a video of that on Friday. You look at before and after, massive increase in traffic flow. But, that requires resources. And so we've done that. We've also done education. #1, we've never done more per pupil for K-12 education than we've done in this recent year. Our colleges, our colleges and universities. Our universities, we have not raised tuition 1 penny for Florida residents. And so you've got about $6,300 on average to go to these universities, and that's part of the reason we're #1 in higher education, because of affordability. So we've been able to do all of that. So that's really positive. We've got a lot of great momentum. We need to keep it going. But one of the reasons why we've been able to do all this stuff, one of the reasons our economy's #1, one of the reasons why we've added over 100,000 manufacturing jobs in Florida just since I've been governor, one of the reasons we have surplus, pay down debt, is because during COVID, we had to make a decision that people had a right to work in this state, businesses had a right to operate, and kids needed to be in school. And I know there was a lot of people down here that I had to fight with that. I remember when I said you can't fine people for masks. They were fining people for not wearing masks, and so I overrode that with an executive order and saved people a lot of money. So we did that, and the contrast between some of these states that were, I mean, look, after 6 or 8 weeks, like, you had to start to think that maybe you need to go in a different direction. Certainly after 3 or 4 months and all this stuff, but nevertheless, people really persisted in this, and it was really intolerable. And then you had the BLM riots. You had a lot of things happening. And so we were able to attract a lot of folks, businesses, individuals, you name it. People would visit Florida. It was funny, I was talking to some folks in tourism about, like, how are things going now and whatever, because you hear different things about, no international travelers, or that, the media will try to say this or that. And I don't, sometimes it's like, you can have an anecdote, but what's the truth? So I'll ask these people what's going on, and they're like, look, we're doing really well, but they're like, we will never be able to recreate 2020 to 2022, because it was just like, Florida was the place where you would go, right? I mean, I was down in the Keys recently. I remember people flooding the Keys, flooding the Panhandle, you name it. They had record years. But part of the reason, and that wasn't really the main reason we took the stand we did. Obviously, we wanted to do well economically, but we also, and even more importantly, wanted to respect people's ability to make the most of their own lives and make the appropriate decisions for themselves. And so, if you wanted your kid to go to school remote in that initial school year, 2020-21, we said fine, but you can't demand that all schools be closed just because you don't want. And guess what? Parents wanted their kids in school overwhelmingly. We don't think that walking down the street, government has a right to tell you you must muzzle yourself and cover your face with a piece of cloth. First of all, it's not going to do anything. But second of all, it's not the appropriate role of government to be doing that. I remember, and first of all, you've seen it in South Florida, we embrace things like restaurants. Fauci hated restaurants. He thought that was like the worst thing ever. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, what about all these people whose livelihoods depend on these things? And so what's happened, like, a lot of the New York restaurants moved here to South Florida. You had a big boom in that in Florida because we were very supportive of them being able to earn a living, which is something that's really, really important. We also, so that contrast was huge. That led to Florida really taking out. We would not be #1 economy had we governed like New York or Illinois during those time periods. And so that was really, really important. Obviously in education too, it's important that the kids are in school, and that will have a ripple effect for many, many decades probably. The states, or some of these states, lock these kids out of school for a long time. Really, really harmful. So those were decisions, and I was using it's interesting, like, you'd have these governors around the country, they'd use executive orders to basically restrict. We were using executive orders to liberate, like saying local governments can't do this, local governments can't restrict, local governments can't do the mass fines or any of this stuff. And that was great, but those were kind of like emergency actions. And so we worked with the legislature, and when Wilton was Senate president, we enacted protections for people against these coercive policies. For example, no one should have to choose between a job they need and a shot that they don't want. And they were trying to fire people because of COVID jabs. We didn't allow that to happen. We also were, and I think if had Florida not taken this stand, that this may have caught fire all across the country. In early 21, people had this idea of COVID vaccine passports. So literally, if you wanted to go to a ball game or a movie theater or a restaurant, they wanted you to have to show proof of an mRNA COVID jab. And so what that does is it eliminates any informed consent, because your life is restricted based on a medical choice you made, which is really not anyone's business. But it was also even more ironic because these mRNA shots weren't preventing you from getting COVID in the first place. And it wasn't preventing you from spreading COVID. You know, it was sold as if you do the shot, you'll never get COVID and COVID will stop. But that wasn't what actually happened. So they wanted to do vaccine passports, which really would have limited the ability of a lot of our residents just to be able to make the most of their own lives. And so we were the first state in the country to pass legislation banning the use of COVID vaccine passports in our state. And not just with government, anything. It was just not an appropriate thing to do. So we viewed it as a civil rights issue. We viewed it as something that we wanted everyone to be able to participate in society. And so we got that on the books. We saved jobs as a result of the employment, not allowing employment mandates. First, they were looking at government agencies. We're like, well, obviously the state, we're not going to do it. Local fire departments, police departments, that's unacceptable. We're not going to let it. But even private businesses, this was run amok, and a lot of people would have lost their jobs. And so we saved thousands of jobs as a result of doing that. And we've also recognized bogus guidance coming from some of these exalted health authorities like the World Health Organization. You know, they want to do a lockdown treaty. We've already done legislation in Florida rejecting the WHO mandates in the state of Florida. So we really believe in informed consent. We really believe, we were also, I think, the first state to ban very dangerous gain-of-function research, which is, I mean, just think where we would be if Fauci had not run wild on gain-of-function research. I mean, it really changed the scope or the path of the country even. So, and people now have looked at that. And almost everything we did, you had the usual suspects saying, oh, this is terrible, they're not listening to experts. And now, no one would advocate for a vaccine passport. No one would advocate, well, some may, but not very persuasively, would advocate that you should lose your job over mRNA shots. No one is saying that somehow what the WHO is doing is good. Everyone has seen this now for what it is. And so, you know, that brings us here today because we're going to be talking about two pieces of legislation that I will sign. The first is SB 700. Now, there's a lot more to that, and we'll probably talk about that. The Commissioner and I will do something in the near future to highlight some of the other provisions. But what this does with respect to putting fluoride in the water supply is it basically doesn't allow that anymore in the state of Florida. It's forced medication when they're jamming fluoride into your water supply. And they did it because, you know, if you have fluoride, it'll help with dental. And I'm not saying that's not true, but we have other ways where people can get access to fluoride. When you do this in the water supply, you're taking away a choice of someone who may not want to have overexposure to fluoride. And there have been studies done, and Joe will talk about it when he comes up, that there are impacts to pregnant women, to children, about having too much of this. And you don't even have to agree with that analysis, but at the end of the day, we should all agree that we want people to be able to make informed consent, have informed consent when it comes to these things. Jamming fluoride in the water supply, irrespective of whatever for the teeth, when you can get that other ways, you know, that's impinging on other people's ability, you know, to have access to water in ways that they may not want to be exposed to what is essentially a forced medication. So the legislature was able to pass that, and we will be able to sign that. Joe Ladapo issued guidance, I guess like last year, right, late last year, about community water fluoridation due to the potential risks that were associated with exposure. And again, pregnant women and children were at most risk. That this fluoride is a naturally occurring mineral present in groundwater, fresh and saltwater, rainwater, soil, plants, and foods. But the community fluoridation adjusts the amount of fluoride in drinking water to levels that are recommended high enough so that it could deal with the tooth decay. But of course, you can get fluoride in toothpaste other ways outside of that. So what you've seen is these studies have been coming out people are now looking more critically at this. And honestly, I think because we saw how out of whack some of these medical elites were during COVID, I think people are just much more skeptical when these elites are trying to jam anything down our throats. And so there's a lot of people that look at this and they say, okay, well, show me the evidence. The burden is on you to prove why this is a net benefit, which I think Joe would argue it's probably not in terms of health. But the highest burden is, why should this be forced on people? And it really shouldn't be forced on people. So you're seeing more and more places. You have countries where a lot of the municipalities in Europe have moved away from the forced fluoridation. Many municipalities in the United States, and a lot in Florida. I mean, we've had a number of counties that acted after Joe's guidance, but also other stuff that was happening there. So this is, I think, the things that a lot of people want to see done. They want to see protections against this. They understand there's other ways that you can get fluoride if that's something that you need. And so there have been studies that have raised concerns about physical and mental health risks that have been associated with overexposure to fluoride. Now, if you're brushing your teeth a couple times a day, that's not going to likely present the same type. But, if you're drinking a lot of water, exposed to that in the home, or that's a different story potentially. And so people just should have that information, and then they should make the appropriate adjustments. And there's nothing preventing you and your house from adding fluoride to your water. If that's what you think is good for you and your family, then you still, of course, have the ability to do that. So we don't want local governments unilaterally injecting the chemical into the water supply and exposing people to potentially harmful side effects. I know the Miami-Dade Board of Commissioners has voted, and I think they voted the right way. And so thank you. Of course, for the counties that voted the other way, we're the legislation that we'll sign is gonna answer that question anyways. But I do think that you guys led on this, and I appreciate your leadership for that. The other bill that I'll be signing is Senate Bill 56. So this was done by Senator Ileana Garcia, and it protects Floridians from geoengineering and weather modification activities. Now, people have been coming up to me. We don't do that in any of our state agencies. There's never been any permit issued from the entire modern history of Florida. We're not engaged in any of that. But people have concerns about, because you have all these people that are saying, well, the way to fight climate change is to inject this stuff and block the sun and do all that. And I'm just like, no, okay? No, we're not doing that in Florida. We're the Sunshine State. We don't need any of this now. So it wasn't being done by the state of Florida, I can tell you that. But this is something that you hear out there. That it's kind of like a little cottage industry where people think that they can, solve global warming by just putting stuff into the atmosphere. So Ileana's bill really slams the door on that. Any of those efforts are dead on arrival in the state of Florida. So you don't have to worry about that going forward. And I know there was some back and forth on this bill. I know there was an attempt by the House leadership to water it down. We were concerned about what may end up happening, but I can say that this strong bill ended up passing and prevailing. So that's good. Good on Ileana for doing that and making sure that we continue to do what's right by the people of Florida. So I'm happy to be supportive of these two measures. I know that there's a lot of folks that wanted to see this done, and so here we are getting it done as usual. And with that, I'll turn it over to our Commissioner of Agriculture, Wilton Simpson.
Thank you, Governor. Florida has passed now the 2025 Farm Bill. After 7 years, it sure would be nice if the federal government would follow our lead here. I would think so. This bill is great news for agriculture, and it's great news for all Floridians. Agriculture is a national security issue. We know that to keep the free state of Florida free, we need to support agriculture. I look forward to joining you in the near future to talk about all of the great things we have done in this comprehensive bill, but today is about medical freedom. Governor, I was proud to be part of your courageous work during COVID, banning vaccine mandates, banning vaccine passports, and being co-chair of the task force to reopen the state of Florida when everyone else was shutting down their states. You have continued to fight that fight, and so have I. This farm bill includes many protections for our consumers. Today we announce that drinking water will hydrate, not medicate. You should not be medicated without your consent. It's plain and simple. This is one more way that we block trampling of personal liberties. There's a fundamental principle here: informed consent. If you have the right to decide what medication you take, you have the right to decide what medication your children take. That should not be a controversial idea in a free society. This provision is more than just water. It's about restoring trust in public institutions. It's about drawing a bright line between public health and personal freedom. And it's about pushing back against creeping philosophy that the government always knows best. It doesn't. We've seen too many examples in recent years where trust the experts turned into sit down, shut up, and obey. Not in Florida, not on our watch. With this legislation, we're saying loud and clear, Florida water will be clean, it will be safe, and it will be medication-free. That's how it should be, and that's how it's going to stay in Florida. From protecting parental rights to fighting back against federal overreach, Governor, thank you for your leadership. I would also like to thank President Albritton, Speaker Perez, Senator Trunow, Representatives Tuck, Alvarez, and McClure, and our partners in the Florida legislature for advancing this bill and standing up for common sense. This is what conservative leadership looks like: protecting agriculture, defending liberty, and putting the people of Florida first. Thank you, Governor, and God bless Florida.
Hello, everyone. I've been down in Miami. I was just thinking as I was sitting there listening to the commissioner, I'm like, I've been to Miami a lot lately. I've had a lot of trips down here. I love Miami. Don't love Miami traffic, and I gotta say I do like the Pinellas County, Tampa Bay area more, but it is beautiful here. It's a very special place here. And a lot of And you know, Miami's obviously a very, very special place. Some people say it's actually part of Florida. I know that there's some discussion about that, but it is a very, very special place. And I also have a lot of friends in the audience today, so it's always a pleasure. A lot of friends in the audience, so that's great. And where do we start? We start with our governor, who made all of this possible, right? Leadership by example, right? Leadership by example, leadership, that is bold in the name of truth and in the name of your convictions and what you believe is right. And that creates space for other people to do the same. It created a space for me to come here when the governor invited me to be the Surgeon General. It's created space for me to do what I think is right scientifically and based on conscience and ethical values. And it's created space for other people to also to live up to what they believe is the right thing to do. So it starts with that man right there. And I want to thank Commissioner Wilton Simpson for this agriculture bill that makes it possible for the children, the families of Florida not to have to worry about fluoridation in their water. This fluoridation is I think of Charlie Brown, and I love that. I don't know, I can't remember his name, but the little guy who holds his blanket, right? And I love it, hold your blanket. But unfortunately, he's a kid. But what we have instead, we have professionals They're doctors, dentists, public health leaders who are holding on to fluoridation like that blanket. I mean, it doesn't matter what the evidence shows, right? Whatever the studies show about potential harms in children and pregnant women, and who knows about the rest of us, they're just holding on to it. And it's okay when you're a kid, but we're grown-ups here. We're adults. We're responsible for, for the lives of other people, and we need to make good decisions. So you just, it's really cute when you're a kid, but you can't hold on to that blanket as a grown-up, okay? I mean, it's just, I don't know, you're Sue Alcalde, right? You're Mayor Sue Alcalde. I listen to the statements, and I understand she's not a scientist, and God bless everyone. I honestly, I don't really so much have a problem with people, whatever position they take on an issue, but I really want to see that you're making an honest decision, and I think that's what's important to me. And it's just like, literally, guys, with this fluoride issue, you have multiple research groups in different states and different countries finding the same things, right? Are they all just making it up? I mean, can you actually, in a sane mind, ignore all of that evidence? You can't. You gotta let go of the blanket. It's okay. It's all right to revise your position. It's all right to do something that goes against what whatever Dr. Fauci, we're talking about him. You know how he feels about fluoridation. But it's okay to reverse your position when there's evidence. I mean, that's the right thing to do. You're in a position of leadership. You're there to serve people, and you got to serve them. And that means doing whatever's needed to serve them. And Senator Garcia, we've been exchanging communications about this weather modification issue. This was an issue that I have learned so much more about, and honestly, I am gobsmacked. I mean, there's quite a lot more to this, and we're still in the Department of Health. We're actually engaged in some work right now to study this scientifically in partnership with the Department of Environmental Protection. And we're engaged in that work, frankly, because I'm incredibly grateful for her leadership in this legislation, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to stop these activities. I don't know if it's going to be enough to stop these activities because of the experience in Tennessee when they've done something similar, although our legislation is more far-reaching, and because of the etiology of the activities, which I've learned more about. I mean, it's one of the pieces that it's kind of stunning. I mean, first of all, as the governor said, are you kidding me, right? So your plan to save us all is to release stuff like aluminum oxide and other things into the sky so that it reflects the sun back out. Like, that's your plan, and you think it will come down at some point, and we will breathe it in, right? And that's your plan to save humanity. It's completely, I mean, it's not only off kilter, but it's really, I mean, it's nuts that people think that they have a right to affect the air that you drink without your permission. I mean, the fluoride's bad enough in terms of people doing stuff without your permission, your acknowledgement, your affirmative participation. But are you kidding me? You know what I mean? The air that we breathe, right? That you have a right to do whatever you think is best for the air in terms of putting something into it. So it's an issue. It's an issue. And I actually want to. So one of our partners in our trips down to Miami and other parts of the city, other parts of the state, pardon me. And I want to say also, I mean, this is a shout out to all of the cities and the counties that have taken wrestled with this issue. Even if they voted the wrong way on it, I'm really appreciative of our communities, our community leaders who made this an issue that they were willing to step up and wrestle with and make a decision on instead of hiding about and not making a decision on. So that's for all of them. And in these visits, we've actually been invited often to different counties and cities. And I certainly I'm a physician. I take care of patients. I have PhD, a doctoral degree in research science, so I'm very comfortable and familiar with science, but it helps to have an expert in an area. And I actually just want to call Dr. Mallon up. She's a University of Florida professor. She's made the trip with us to many, many parts of Florida to present some of the science. So, Dr. Mallon, would you share some words, please?
Yes. Thank you so much to Governor DeSantis and Dr. Latipo for having me here today. I'm an epidemiologist and an assistant professor at the University of Florida, as well as a clinical psychologist. And I have been conducting research on fluoride in human health for about 12 years now. I first want to say it's really been an incredible journey from speaking with Dr. Latipo at the press conference last November when he issued guidance on community fluoridation, to traveling around Florida and presenting research on health effects of fluoride exposure over the last several months. And one of the most rewarding parts of this experience has been meeting and hearing from Floridians in local communities across the state whose voices are now finally being heard on this issue. But we also saw situations like in Bartow, Florida, where, for example, where many people pleaded with their elected officials to stop adding fluoridation chemicals to their drinking water, and that didn't happen. Now with this bill, their requests will be answered. There have been major milestones in the research on fluoride and neurodevelopment over the last decade, and especially in the last year. And with more and more studies finding associations of fluoride exposure with adverse neurological outcomes, even at levels that we commonly encounter in Florida. The findings of these studies point to an imminent need for policy change, and the policy change happening in Miami-Dade today with the ultimate signing of this bill is one that will protect the brains of children in Florida from unreasonable risk of harm for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to recognize friends in the audience today. I'd like to recognize Marla Maples. Marla Maples with Global Wellness Forum. She has been instrumental in helping me understand why Florida needed to be at the forefront of this issue and how important it is globally. Also, I'd like to recognize the Popak family joining us here today. So it is a truly significant day for the state of Florida when we are taking decisive action to protect our skies, our environment, and the well-being of all Floridians. I want to express my deepest gratitude to Governor DeSantis for his unwavering support and leadership in helping this happen. Senate Bill 56, very shortly a reality. This landmark legislation sends a clear message: Florida will not stand by while unregulated activities threaten the delicate balance of our atmosphere, and there will be harsh consequences for those who do. So, Governor, forgive me, I've got to sit down because I am not feeling well.
Hey, we got you. Would you bring it up? We got you.
Do we have water?
I don't know.
Do you want some food?
We have water.
you kidding? This was my moment. I could not. Nerve-wracking, but this was my moment, and I so appreciate your grace, Governor DeSantis. So for those who are unfamiliar, the terms weather modification and geoengineering encompass a range of technologies and proposals aimed at deliberately altering Earth's climate system. While some of those concepts might sound crazy, science fiction, conspiracy theories, they're being actively researched and in some cases even implemented on parts of the planet. This can include injecting substances into the atmosphere with the intention of reflecting sunlight, manipulating cloud formation, or attempting to influence precipitation patterns. Many complain constantly about, oh, what's this etch-a-sketch in the sky? What is it that's going on above and beyond the clouds? Well, cause for concern led to this. These are not natural occurrences. They're deliberate interventions in complex natural systems. The potential negative consequence of widespread unchecked weather modification and geoengineering are deeply concerning. Introducing foreign substances into our atmosphere can have unintended and far-reaching effects on our weather patterns, potentially leading up to unpredictable droughts, floods, and disruption to agricultural cycles. The long-term impacts of our ecosystems, our air quality, and even our health are largely unknown but devastating. We're talking about fundamentally altering the very systems that sustain life, often with limited understanding of cascading consequences. This isn't just an environmental issue. It affects every single one of us and should not in any way, shape, or form be politicized. The skies above us are a shared resource, and the idea that private companies or even government entities could unilaterally decide to manipulate them without full transparency and public consent is deeply troubling. We have a right to know what is being introduced into our atmosphere and what the potential ramifications are. We must demand accountability and oversight to ensure that the pursuit of technological solutions do not overcome at the expense of our health, environment, and our future. The time to pay attention is now, and that's exactly what we're doing in Florida, before these interventions become widespread and irreversible. Florida is uniquely vulnerable to environmental changes. Our coastal communities, our vital agricultural sector, and our delicate ecosystem are all susceptible to the unpredictable impacts of unregulated weather modification. By enacting shortly SB 56, Florida is taking a proactive and responsible step to safeguard our citizen and our state and its citizens. We are sending a powerful message to the nation and the world that we prioritize the health of our environment and the right of our citizens to clean, unmanipulated skies. We are setting an example of responsible governance, demonstrating that we will not allow unchecked experimentation with our atmosphere. This is about protecting our present and ensuring a healthy future for generations to come. Thank you, Governor DeSantis, for your leadership on this. Today, Florida has chosen to protect its skies and its future. Let this be a turning point, inspiring other states and the federal government to take similar action. Thank you very much.
Guys, can we just give another round of applause to Ileana Garcia? Absolutely nothing is going to stop that woman for fighting for the people of Florida. Absolutely nothing. And folks, you know, before I get started, I also would like, if you could please indulge me, and let's give a round of applause to America's governor right here. Right? And I think, sir. Absolutely. Folks, I think it goes without saying, that the world would not be the same place were it not for the bravery of this man that's standing up here, and he's much too modest, but somebody has to say it, right? If he wouldn't have opened up the state of Florida, if he wouldn't have fought back with all of this rhetoric about, you know, what could have been this and could have been that, which, by the way, has been debunked now, if he wouldn't have been brave enough to fight back, I don't know, we'd probably still be locked up, right? And if he wouldn't have chosen, right, such a servant that is Dr. Joseph Ladapo, that is brave enough, right, to stand up, no matter, I mean, I've seen people throw so much heat at this guy, right? And he is fearless, absolutely fearless, because he does things because they're the right thing to do, right? As is our Commissioner Wilton Simpson. And so, folks, I don't want to be too long, but the reason I say all of this, right, is because I'm standing up here and, like, I'm not supposed to be in politics, right? I'm up here because I admire, and I used to watch people like Ron DeSantis and Joseph Ladapo and Commissioner Simpson on TV, right? But you know what's funny is that courage is contagious. Right? There's something about courage that when you have people that are willing to fight back and willing to do the right thing, that it makes you want to say, man, I want to be like that guy, right? Like, I want to be able to say to my children that I was part of the fight to make the world a better place. And the world would not be a better place. The United States would not be a better place if these two men didn't do what they did at a time where they were being highly criticized, right? And so now we go to water fluoridation, right? And there's a reason why I tell you about bravery, right? Because I see one of my colleagues here, Vice Chairman Keone McGee, right? And I can tell you that the political machine, they threw everything at us, right? And I want to mention my colleagues that voted with me because I know that it wasn't an easy vote. Right? Commissioner Keone McGee, Commissioner Danielle Cohen-Higgins, Commissioner Oliver Gilbert, Commissioner Anthony Rodriguez, Commissioner J.C. Bermudez, Commissioner Keon Hardeman, Commissioner Rene Garcia. They threw everything they had at us. For what? For something that they're trying to hold on to that the facts and the science just doesn't add up. I thought we learned our lesson with COVID. I thought Ron DeSantis laid the smack down, right? And showed everybody what leadership looked like. And I thought we weren't going to make those decisions and those mistakes anymore. I feel like that's what you do when you are an educated human being. You make a mistake, and then you look back and you say, hey, how are we going to fix it, right? But sometimes people just won't let go. And I think the world is a better place because of folks like Ron DeSantis, like Joseph Ladapo, like Ashley Mallon, like Commissioner Simpson, and like just a few folks that I want to mention, Dr. Claire Stagg, Dr. Maya Assey, Stand for Health Freedom, especially my good friends Scott and Joe Kelly, Jeb Hanwerger, Gary Roche, and all the health warriors, including Dr. Ashley Mallon, that fought the good fight, because there are elected officials, like the ones that are in this room, that they care about what you think and that they're here to represent you. And you know, a lot of people think we live in a democracy, but we don't. We live in a constitutional republic. Constitutional republic only works when the people are part of the decision-making process. And I admire the fact that all of you guys are willing to work hard and fight back in order to make change. And I admire the fact that there's elected officials up here that are willing to listen to you. I pledge that I will always listen to you. God bless you.
Thank you. Well, thanks, everybody. I think that this is these are good measures. We'll obviously put our John Hancock on them very soon, and when we receive the bills. But we just wanted to make clear exactly where we stood and to give credit to the folks who work these, both at the state level with Commissioner Simpson and Dr. Ladapo, but also at the local level with the commissioners here in Miami-Dade and many other counties around the state of Florida. And then, of course, to see Eliana. I think she's fine. You know, sometimes you have these things, and so she bounced back and was able to give a great presentation. But her really being determined and leading on this effort was vital for that to get passed, because there was a time where it looked like the House was going to deep six it. And I do think it was people were speaking out. This was something that mattered to a lot of people. And when you get elected, you know, you run on what you're going to do, and when you deviate from that and you're not doing the people's business, that's not a recipe for success. And I think you saw a lot of that, you know, in the Florida legislature, particularly the Florida House, with a number of different things. And so this was in doubt. It got there. The condos were in doubt. And I think the Senate had a great bill that got across the finish line. But, you know, one of the things that I called on for many months now and have huge support from the people of this state is what Florida families would like. We don't have an income tax. We're never going to have one as long as I have anything to say about it. So we don't have to worry about that. At least not yet. Who knows down the road? But for me, don't worry. It's never going to happen. But and then we're fortunate that we have 142 million visitors last year. A lot of our tax revenue is paid by non-Floridians, the tourists, the Canadians, the snowbirds. That's a good thing, so we have less of a burden on Florida families. But the one thing that is pinching people are property taxes. And so I said, ultimately we want a constitutional amendment on the ballot because this is local governments, that are doing it. The state's role is minimal. We can't just, change the millage rates, although there is this, required local effort that we could definitely relieve people of, and we're working on doing that. But in the before you get on the ballot, people can get relief now. We had a great proposal that would give people, homesteaded Floridians, particularly middle class, $500 to $1,000 rebate on their next year's property tax bill, November, when you get the notices going out. And that would be really, really good. And we have a lot of support from individual legislators. But this was not anything that the House leadership was willing to entertain, and largely just because they want to be different than me. If I'm saying property tax, they're saying, they actually want to cut taxes for Canadian tourists. You'd get $40, I think, a year, and no property tax. Are you kidding me? So, but they realize that that's not a good spot to do. And so what the House leadership did, the last day of the legislative session on Friday, convened a committee of 37 people, including some of the most left-wing Democrats in the state of Florida. We have almost a 3-to-1 Republican majority. You shouldn't be trying to resurrect the Democratic Party when you have a 3-to-1 majority. You should be winning and continuing our wins. Instead, they're doing that. So you're putting very far left on this committee, and then they have a hearing on the last day of session. And I don't even think I need to say this because I think most people get this, but if you have a legislative body that is creating a 37-member committee, they're not doing that because they want to give you property tax relief. They're doing that to try to kill property tax relief. So this is a total dog and pony show. This is not anything that is credible. The fact that you would wait until the last day of the legislative session, that just shows your cards. It shows, what you're trying to do. That's not what the voters sent any of these guys there to do. They want relief from property taxes, and we have an opportunity to do that. Doing that committee, and have very left wing on the committee, that ain't cutting it. And I don't think anybody is fooled when they start to see those types of things. If I wanted something done, I do it. I don't put a committee of 37 people together where they're not going to be able to agree on anything. So just know that that's something that is that was done at the last day. Obviously, they didn't even come close to doing a budget. They didn't come close to doing, their basic core constitutional functions. And so now they're saying they're going to, do it by sometime in June. The reality is, it's honestly not that difficult to do any of this stuff. You know what you do? You just look back what's been done under the last 6 years. You look at when Wilton was Senate President, or Kathleen Pasadoma, or Paul Reder. You just look at that and you basically copy and paste. That's really all you have to do. You don't have to do much different, and so it shouldn't be that hard to get this done and to just do your job. But when I see a committee of 37 people, when I see far left Dems being injected into this process, when you have a 3-to-1, almost a 3-to-1 Republican supermajority, which, by the way, they didn't have before I came along. So why would you be doing that? I have no interest in trying to throw a lifeline to the far left. Floridians have rejected the far left. That's not what they want. They want the solid, bold, conservative vision that we've had, and that's what we're going to insist on. Okay, do we have any questions?
Governor, going off those comments, are you saying that you would not sign the tax bill? I know that it's still coming together.
I have not seen a tax bill. I can tell you, I want Florida first tax policy. I don't want Canadian first tax policy. I mean, I don't know the details. I just tell you I'm highly skeptical of that plan. Let's just put it that way. Yes, sir.
Governor, you mentioned condo reform. The House and the Senate both passed one. What did you like about the bill? What didn't you like about the bill? And ultimately, what would you like to see when it comes to condo relief? So many concerned citizens here talking about it.
And I've been a concerned citizen too. And I was down here hosting roundtables last fall because people said they needed relief, and they did need relief. This bill, the bill that had been enacted, was doing things that it was not supposed to do or intended to do, and that was so far afield of the safety concerns with a building collapse like we saw at Surfside that something needed to be done. What I didn't like about the House bill initially was that it was more geared towards developers, and it probably would have helped force people out of their units, and in Miami especially, some of the older things. And people think these are all like multi-million-dollar places on the ocean. No, you have places all over this county, and people own them free and clear. They can't afford a $100,000 assessment. So then they're forced to sell. And yeah, they probably would make more money today than they would have 20 years ago because people want, but then where do they go? They can't afford another house. And so I thought the House bill was bad. The Senate bill that Jennifer Bradley did, that Ileana Garcia, that's basically what passed. And I think that recognizes the crushing impact that some of these assessments are having, and I think it provides a way to be able to keep people in their homes. And so I think all in all, I think it was well done. If there needs to be more done, then I'll be supportive of doing it. And, you know, I hear some people in the House, they were trying to say that if you do condo relief, that somehow you're bailing out condo owners. But you're not bailing them out from their decisions. You are relieving them from legislation that has caused this. And we could sit there and talk about these condo boards, and should some of them have been doing more upkeep of? Yes. 100%. I mean, honestly, these condo politics, you want to talk about Miami politics? The condo politics is cutthroat. So there's a lot of stuff. But the way you do that, you reform that process. You provide more transparency. You do things, and I think there's some things in the bill that may address some of these things. That's what you do. But you also have to realize Rome wasn't built in a day. To just demand that everyone all of a sudden pay all these assessments, and assessments, quite frankly, on things that are not like the difference between the building being viable or not viable. It was way beyond that. So I think that it ended up in a good spot. I was not supportive of the House bill. I would have vetoed that and called them in for special session. And don't forget, I did the special session in January, and we did the immigration, which the House didn't want to do. And now we did it. Now everyone's celebrating because we're working with ICE and we're getting all these people off the streets. None of that would have happened had we not done that legislation. I mean, that's just the reality. And that was us doing it. And, you know, you had these folks in the House. They said, oh, it doesn't need to be done, not something that's important. And then actually drafted a bill that would have made us a de facto sanctuary state, totally contrary to what we wanted to do. And again, the people spoke up. And so we ended up getting good legislation then. But in that special session, I called for the condo relief to be done then. There's no reason the bill that was passed could not have been passed in January. That would have given people peace of mind. It would have averted some of the other assessments that have come back in the intervening months. It would have given more time to be able to work this out. And so it should have been done in January. It did get done. I'm glad that the Bradley bill is basically what passed. And then the same thing with these petition fraud. You know, they go get these petitions, and it was documented in 24 the amount of fraud in these petitions. And so that needed to be addressed. You can't just have these petitions being circulated. This is the Constitution of Florida that could be changed as a result. So that needed reform, and that could have been done in January too. And then they waited, the House especially waited, and so now it's done. But the reality is, you know, there's stuff out there on the street now that people are trying to do. So all in all, I knew the condos needed to get done. I'm glad it got done. I would have called the special session again had they not done it, because people need relief. Well, no. I mean, I think it's kind of caricatured as kind of kooky, but I think Eliana sketched it out. There are, and I, you know, because people would ask me, they're like, why is there, are you spraying things? And I'm, no, we're not. The state government is not doing any of that. And so I'm like, what are you talking about, right? Because we just weren't doing it. But if you look, there are movements, private businesses, And their view is we can save you from global warming by injecting different things in the atmosphere, blocking the sun, doing all this stuff. And that is not something we're going to do in Florida. First of all, we're the sunshine state. We want to have the nice sunshine. So I think that this is something that there are interests and entities out there that want to do some of this. And it's not something that is appropriate for the state of Florida. I don't think it's probably appropriate, period, anywhere. But, think about it, like, these people are doing their thing. They're going to try to block the sun. They're going to try to do all this. And then what's the fallout from that? What does that mean when it starts to rain or this or that? And people aren't guinea pigs. I mean, we have a right to have nice sunshine and nice air. So it's not something that's just being made up. There is a movement to do it. Now, you can go and watch a plane, and if a plane has normal exhaust and condensation, that's a contrail, which is something that is normal. That doesn't mean that the commercial plane is doing anything, but there is definitely movement to do some of the spraying, and I don't like that. One more.
Senator Pizzle is in the Democrat Party. What does that say about the party as a whole? You said they're dead, they say they're not. Is that like a warning sign for Democrats, especially here in Florida? Maybe you might be voting?
Well, I think what's happening is people are reading the writing on a wall. You can't get elected with a D by your name in many parts of the state anymore. Even Miami-Dade is tough, right? Because they've seen, and quite frankly, it's because we've really exposed the left. I mean, remember, who was fighting me about having Florida be open during COVID? It was the left that was fighting us. Who was fighting us when we banned the mandates? It was the left that was fighting us. Who was fighting us when we said that third graders shouldn't be taught in school that they were born in the wrong body and their gender's a choice? It was the left who came after us and attacked us on that. Who came after us when we said we're not going to allow the rioting and we're going to have an anti-riot law and all this stuff, and Wilton helped pass that? It was the left that came after it, and so we've just drawn such a sharp contrast, I think an effective contrast, that basically you have committed people on the left, and that's their view, but like most other people now, that's why we have 1.2 million more Republicans. We used to have, when I became governor, we had 300,000 more Democrats, so you've seen a big shift. So part of that is that, but then part of it, I think what you're seeing, and I think you're seeing this in the legislature, is people realize they can't get elected unless they have an R by their name. So you have people that are smuggling their leftism into the Republican Party. And so they have an R by their name, but they're not governing as ours. And the fact that you would have almost a 3-to-1 House majority, and they tried to deep six our immigration enforcement in January and wanted to do a sanctuary bill with a 3-to-1 majority. And so, and then they brought in Democrats to change party labels, but they still vote very liberal. So they haven't had an epiphany. It's just more of a pathway to power. So I think for Republican voters, especially in the primaries, I think the question's going to be, just putting a party label, to me, has lost a lot of the meaning, because the contrast is being blurred by these folks who are running as Republicans but still have leftist instincts. And it's ultimately not the label as much as the principles that you're advocating. What is motivating you to do all this? And if you're being motivated by leftism, you can put whatever lipstick you want on that, but leftism is a pig. Putting lipstick on it, it's still a pig, guys. And so that's something that I think we have to watch out for. I mean, clearly you're going to see that in Miami-Dade as the registration. I mean, we may end up having, within the next 6 to 9 months, more registered Republicans here than Democrats county-wide. It's very close to happening. Maybe a year. But what I tell Republicans, too, is the surest way to see Florida go back to being a purple, or even maybe being, because when I got elected, they said Florida was about to become a blue state. The surest way is to dull the contrast between what we believe and what the left believes. And part of that is throwing lifelines. I mean, we just had this, we've had some of these issues on the property tax, empowering the left on muddling up our property tax relief. Why would you do that? You don't need to do that. You have almost a 3-to-1 majority. You should be leading with purpose and conviction on that. Some of these other things they were doing, we worked really hard to do litigation reform, and it's had an impact, a positive impact, business-wise. It's had an impact on premiums, where we've finally seen some stability. And even in the citizens insurance in Miami-Dade, you had a lot of people that have gotten a decrease this year. No one thought that was even possible a few years ago. And they tried to undo that. No one was asking for those reforms to be undone. It would have given more money to lawyers. These are lawyers that by and large support leftist causes. Why are you throwing them a lifeline? It's bad policy, and it's also very bad politics. And so that, I think, is going to be the test. Are you in this to solidify, the success and expand on it, or are you trying to leverage this Republican voter advantage for your own purposes or liberal purposes? And that's very much up for grabs right now. I mean, think about it. You've had this legislative session, you had the largest Republican majority we've ever had in the Florida House of Representatives, and yet it was the least significant and consequential of more recent majorities. Certainly when the previous 2 years, and then when Wilton was Senate President, the House was churning out a lot of great stuff. My first 2 years, we had Jose Oliva from Miami churning out a lot of great stuff, and that kind of has gone astray, under the current iteration. And you have to ask yourself, if you have all these numbers, why aren't you really being bold? Why aren't you seizing the moment to deliver really big things for the voters that put you there? So that's going to continue to be a dividing line, and I think that voters are more and more, the people I talk to come up to me now, they're surprised at what they've seen, in some of the stuff in Tallahassee. They don't understand it because we've had a winning formula. We've been able to deliver good. I mean, the fact that we're #1 economy, all these other things, that's positive. Our fiscal's positive. So it is a little bit frustrating, but here's the good thing about it. Ultimately, you elect people, they get in there, they can go, they can drink the Kool-Aid in Tallahassee, they can not listen to you, but you do get a say in this, every 2 years when you're looking at it. And I think that's going to be some interesting conversations when we get around to the 2026 cycle. Thank you, guys. See you later.